Bonnie, thank you. Okay. So Larry, is this on? Great. Okay, so I'd like to welcome you all this morning, and Bonnie, thank you for that warm introduction. So when Reverend Bonnie asked me to speak several weeks ago, whenever it was, she'd asked me to talk about releasing limiting belief systems. And the most effective way I know to release negative and limiting beliefs is with EFT, which is a very powerful tapping technique. But as I'll be teaching a class here next month, I did not want to talk about that and turn this into an infomercial. So I decided to talk about something else. And as things turn out, what I'm going to be talking about kind of dovetails nicely with what Larry's talk from last month. So I'm going to begin by telling you a joke. That these three people sitting in hell, a Catholic, a Jew, and a religious science practitioner. Okay. So they're sitting around and sweating and feeling kind of uncomfortable. And so they turn to the Catholic guy and they say, well, why are you here? And he hangs his head and looks down and he says, well, you know, when I was on Earth, I used to eat meat on Fridays. You know, they all commiserate and they don't think that was so bad. Then they turn to the Jewish guy and they say, why are you here? And he hangs his head and he looks down and he says, well, you know, when I was on Earth, I used to like to eat pork and bacon. So meanwhile, the religious science practitioner is just sitting there and she's smiling and she has this great big grin on her face. And so they turn to her and they say, why are you here and why are you smiling? And she says, it's very simple. I'm not here. Okay. So the good news of salvation is that the world is not real, none of this is happening, and we're not here. Now, the Hindus say that the world is Maya, or illusion. The Buddhists talk about emptiness, and they say that all things are empty and devoid of any real substance or content or meaning. There's a wonderful sutra called the Prajnaparamita Sutra that says that form is emptiness, and emptiness is nothing other than form. And many of you are probably familiar with a set of teachings called the Course in Miracles. And the Course says that projection makes perception, and that there is no world apart from our thoughts, and that it is with our thoughts that we create the world. The bottom line is that what we think we see is actually an optical illusion, or maybe I should say an optical delusion, and that the way we see it is not the way it is. Or as Anais Nin once observed, we see things not as they are, but as we are. Okay. So let me go to our slides here. There we go. Okay. All right. So as you can see, the first slide is empty. This whole talk will be empty, devoid of meaning.
It won't be here.
Okay. So you're very familiar with this idea that we are one, that we are all part of the mind of God, you know, the whole enchilada, what Ernest Holmes called the whole thing. We are thoughts in the mind of God, individualization of the one spirit, and we're all waves in the great ocean of consciousness. This idea of unity, that there's unity in diversity, which is common to all the great world religions. We are one people, part of the human family. We are all part of the great web of life. You know, the mystical body of Christ. And right on every single dollar bill, there's this phrase, e pluribus unum, you know, meaning out of many, one. You're all familiar with symbols, of course. We use symbols every day. And symbols are, again, common to all myths, religions, and world cultures. And these are visual, nonverbal metaphors. They're ways of communicating meaning nonverbally. And they can express complex and multiple truths simply and immediately. And they also can communicate spiritual truths at a level which is deeper than the rational mind. And one way that symbols are used are to symbolize the relationship between the individuals and the cosmos. So I'm going to share a series of symbols with you here. And these symbols all have to do with oneness and the idea of unity and diversity. But what I want you to do is not so much listen to my words, but to look at the symbols and see and feel the inner spiritual truth. See and feel the inner truth that these symbols are conveying non-verbally. So this here is a lotus flower. And one of the characteristics of the lotus is that its roots are sunk deep in the mud. It grows in the water, but the flower itself is open to the atmosphere and, of course, facing the sun. An old Zen symbol. This is the Buddhist wheel of law, also symbolizing the Eightfold Path in Buddhism. This symbol is the endless knot. And this symbol and the next one are found both in Buddhism but also in Celtic religions. A symbol of continuity and things with neither beginning nor end. Another version of that symbol. You're very familiar with the yin-yang symbol. Okay. And this symbol contains, it's amazing, multiple meanings within it. You can see the white and the dark, yin and yang, the balance, the duality of opposites. But also yin is constantly changing yang is constantly chasing yin, and yin is constantly turning into yang is constantly turning into yin. And to symbolize the wholeness of the opposites, and also the idea of divine harmony, divine balance, equilibrium, even in extremes. Yin-yang within each of us. This shows the yin-yang symbol with the 8 trigrams of the I Ching. And so these symbols are all unity symbols, all symbols of the great oneness. This shows the star and crescent of Islam within a Star of David, within a multi-petaled lotus. Okay. So the Star of David, and again, this symbol has multiple layers of meaning. In Judaism, it is believed that the way to God for the people of Israel is through the study of Torah. And so these 3 points, God, Israel, and Torah, are linked, inextricably linked together, but also has the 2 triangles symbolizing as above, so below. And this, of course, symbolizing all the directions, the oneness of all things. Another version of that. Showing the cosmos within the Star of David. This is the cross, of course, and the cross also is a unity symbol. And for many Christians, the cross is a symbol of God's salvation, of salvation through Jesus Christ. It's also a symbol of the 4 directions. And again, this is found not just in Christianity, but in many traditions and cultures around the world. So mandalas, or some people call them mandalas, but I believe mandala is correct, and again are unity symbols. And these often arise from mystical states of consciousness. They are found cross-culturally in many religions, and they are expressions of mystical, spiritual, and psychological truths. So again, allow these to speak to you and allow these to communicate and resonate on a deep inner level. This also is another Native American mandala. This is from the Huichol Indians in Mexico. This is from the Inuits in Alaska. This is an example of Islamic art. This is from Buddhism. This is a Tibetan tanka. Again, even though this Tibetan has the Star of David in the middle. This is the Kabbalistic tree of life with the 9 sefirot. Another example of the tree of life, as above, so below. This is the 9 points of the Enneagram, but how they're related to each other. Again, different symbols of the world's religions. Emptiness. Okay. And so we're all familiar with this idea that we are one, but when we go inside ourselves, on another level, we are not one. We are male and female, white and black, brown and yellow. We are straight or gay or bi or however we define ourselves. We are vegetarians or vegans or carnivores, smokers or non-smokers. We come from all kinds of different ethnicities and backgrounds, nationalities and cultures, different belief systems. And we actually revel in our individuality and differentness. We all want to do our own thing. You see people say things like, I need to find myself. I need to do my own thing. I got to do what's right for me. Give me some space. Anybody have teenagers here? Leave me alone. Want to do it, Frank Sinatra's theme song, My Way, which is a lot of our theme song. I'll do it my way. We all want to be me. We want to be ourselves. And so our 2 greatest desires, our first greatest desire is simply to love and be loved, to belong, to be part of a family or a tribe or community. But our second deepest need and greatest desire is to individuate, to be independent, to be free, to be my own person and do my own thing. And what's interesting is that these 2 greatest desires that we all have are in conflict with each other, and that we all need to find our balance between being an individual, separating, individuating, doing my own thing, and then, being in a relationship, being part of a greater family, tribe, or community. And these 2 greatest desires are related to our 2 greatest fears. On the one hand, to love and be loved, we have this fear of abandonment, fear of being abandoned, isolated, rejected, alone, or separate. Anybody here who's ever experienced the pain of rejection in a relationship has felt this. But then our second greatest fear is that of engulfment or enmeshment. A lot of people in relationships say, leave me alone, I need some space. Fear of being engulfed, enmeshed, of losing my freedom, of losing my identity, being controlled or taken over by another. And so a lot of us bounce back and forth between these two deep fears, which are related to our 2 greatest needs. And so we have this inner conflict, being my own person versus being part of a greater whole. So this is a quotation from Albert Einstein. And he said, a human being is a part of the whole universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical illusion of consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison, restricting us to our own personal desires and affection for a few persons nearest to us. An optical illusion of consciousness. We're all familiar with the idea of trance. And this trance is an altered state of consciousness characterized by a narrowed focus of attention and heightened suggestibility. Examples are watching TV or a movie, driving an automatic pilot, getting engrossed in a book or a novel, feeling infatuated with a romantic partner, or even falling in love. Trance is not just something we experience in hypnosis or meditation. And we go in and out of trance states throughout the day, many times a day. And so we experience this trance of separation. Trances can be induced through rhythmic repetition or by intensively focusing on something or on ourselves, on anything. One of the ways you induce hypnosis is by focusing on a dot or focusing on a pendulum going back and forth, but by intense focus. And so we hypnotize ourselves every day by what we tell ourselves. And one of the biggest things we tell ourselves most frequently, we use the words I, me, mine, and myself. I think this, I did that, I want this, I want that. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. There's this intensive focus on ourselves to the point where we think We delude ourselves into thinking that I am this person, of course, who I am, but that I am separate from the entire rest of the universe. And so we hypnotize ourselves into this trance of separation. We focus on the foreground of I, me, my, mine, myself, and we ignore the background of our families, our communities, and the rest of the world. And so we slice and dice the whole universe with our beliefs and concepts that divide a seamless and continuous universe into me versus other, us versus them, right versus wrong, good versus evil, etc. We separate things in our minds with our words, with our concepts, with our beliefs. And so we've all seen many pictures like this, of the world from outer space. But where are the boundaries? And from space there are no boundaries. Here down, we make such a big deal out of legal or financial or political boundaries. But from space you can see, of course, that the world is one. That ultimately there are no boundaries. Okay. So we're probably all familiar with this. But again, the vase in the foreground and the image of the two faces in the background. What's interesting about this is that we can only see that we've been conditioned to seeing foreground and the rest is background. Or we can see the faces as foreground and the vase in the middle is background. But we can only see one or the other, foreground or background. Another image like this, seeing the man with the horn or the face in the background or vice versa. The young lady or the old lady. Now you can see that the cherry tree, or whatever kind of tree, is in the foreground with the mountain in back. But very interesting, in Chinese and Japanese art, the background is as important as the foreground. Here in the West, we focus right on the picture, a person's picture, we focus right on whatever's in the foreground. Whereas in other cultures, they tend to include the background as being equally as important. This image, is the man looking straight at us, or is he facing to the right? Now, I play piano, and a piano or any instrument, you can play, for example, an F sharp or a B flat or a C, and you can play that one tone, but you can't do very much with it. And any tone is meaningless without the greater context of all the keys of all the tones. Okay? And so an F sharp only has meaning within the concept of the key of F sharp or the key of B. F sharp is the fifth of B, for example. And F sharp only has meaning in relationship to F, the tone before it, or in relationship to the G, the tone after it. And obviously, to create a beautiful symphony, or even a simple song, we need all the tones and all the keys. And any musician, nobody would ever have this idea. For example, some people think that, white people are better than black people, or black people are better than Chinese people. But no musician would ever think that the white keys are somehow better or superior to the black keys, or the black keys would be superior to the white. It's totally ridiculous, because we need all the notes and all the keys to make beautiful music. Whoops, go back there. Okay, so are you all familiar with fractals? Yeah. And if you ever get the chance, there's an organization that I think is called Fractal First Friday in Albuquerque. The first Friday of every month, they have this amazing slideshow. It's like $10 or something. It's at the planetarium. But the first Friday of every month is called First Friday Fractals. Very much worth the trip up to Albuquerque to see this. Okay. But fractals are patterns that have this repeating iterative pattern, repeated over and over again, that display this quality of self-similarity. Each of these patterns is similar to itself. So you can see in this fractal how they start in the kind of the upper left-hand corner, and then they swirl around, and each time that pattern is repeated, and it gets larger and larger and larger. But even the larger globes on the outside, you can see how the smaller ones within each self, and this pattern is repeated both infinitesimally, going smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where you can't see it, and then exponentially larger out to infinity. So it's going to infinity in both directions. Repeated patterns. Oops. There's another example of this. Repetitive iterated pattern. And another example. Okay. So an image or phenomenon having an iterative, repeated pattern on every scale from very small to very large. And fractals all display this quality of self-similarity, similarity to itself. And fractals are found throughout nature, in clouds, waves, snowflakes, beaches, mountains, plants, trees. It was not until Benoit Mandelbrot discovered the equation behind fractals that they were even being able to map complex phenomena like clouds and mountains and sand and beaches and etc. Because before the Euclidean geometry works for rooms and rectangles and squares, it does not work very well for complex phenomena like fractals. Okay. And so they were able to use these using equations to actually begin to map complex phenomena in nature. And so you can see how you start with an idea and then differentiate, and then it grows to its differentiation. Here's how they generate simple fractals. Again, taking a pattern, and that pattern is repeated and iterated. So these mountains, and these are examples of fractals. Fractals. See the pattern of the cracks in the ground. Repeated patterns, variations on a theme. This is found a lot of time in music, variations on a theme. Clouds are fractals. Leaves are fractals. Repeated self-similarity. Now with each of these images, I want you to look for the pattern. There's a pattern in each of these images. So look for the pattern in each of these. The sunflower. Sunflowers again in clouds. That's one of the manifestations of the divine in nature, is seeing the order, seeing the beauty and order in nature. That's how God manifests in the world. Again, seeing the pattern. Look at the lower part of the trees. Again, these are fractals. Forests are fractals. Repeated self-similarity. Now these little creatures are fractals. These are fractals. Again, you see the repeated pattern, the self-similarity. These are fractals. These people are fractals. Look at both the body shape, but also look at the posture, how many of them are. Okay? These children are fractals. Patterns of self-similarity. These folks are fractals. Again, self-similarity. Oops, go back to that last one. Okay. So ultimately, all of us, we are fractals. We all exhibit repeating patterns of self-similarity. We share patterns of similarity in our bodies, our habits, our moods, our temperaments, in our genetics, of course, with parents, relatives, children, and our ancestors. We share patterns of similarity with what we call other people. We share patterns of similarity with other mammals. Patterns of similarity, ultimately with all living things. All living things have the same molecular and biochemical structure that we do. All plants, all animals are our relatives. We share a pattern of similarity with atoms, molecules, stars, and planets. We are fractals, self-similar patterns in a universe of fractals. We are part of all of it. Okay, now you can't see this very well, but you're all familiar with holograms, and this is a holographic image. And what a holographic image, of course, is an image, is a three-dimensional image in space. And so this is a clip from a movie, and what you can't see really clearly is that the man on the left is a real actor. The image of Dolly Parton on the right, that's a holographic image. So the actor is interacting with a holographic image of Dolly there. So holographic image have this unusual quality that each part contains the whole. If you have an old black and white negative, black and white photography, you would need the whole negative in order to reproduce the whole picture. But with a holographic negative, they make a negative which is contained of refractive patterns, on what they call a negative or a plate. But in order to recreate the whole, any small part of that, from the upper left or the upper right, every piece of that will recreate the whole. Now you lose some resolution. You get better resolution with the whole, with the whole image, but every single little part contains the whole. So the whole is contained in each part, and each individual part contains the blueprint, the hologram of the whole. And this holographic principle exists within our own bodies. There are people who do iridology, and the whole body, the health of the body is mapped on the iris and pupil of the eye. People who do foot reflexology, the body is mapped on the foot. Hand reflexology, all the organs are mapped on the hands. The ear, you can see an upside down little infant or body on the ear there called a homunculus, but the idea that the whole body is mapped out on our ears. Chinese doctors do tongue diagnosis. Again, they can diagnose and treat the whole body through the tongue, and the same with acupuncture points in the ear. Every part of the body is mapped out on every part of the body and repeated over and over and over again. So we too are holograms. So we are holograms in a holographic universe, and just as we contain the DNA in our own unique bodies, so also we contain the DNA or the hologram of the entire universe. We are holograms in a holographic universe. And you all probably remember this. There's a wonderful little poem by William Blake where he says, to see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, to hold the whole universe in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. And he used the word hour because hour rhymes with flower, but what he really meant was moment, okay? Because all of eternity is contained within each moment, and all the universe is contained within each grain of sand, including ourselves. Okay. And so this is a map of a web and drops from the web, but this is also a metaphor for Indra's net, or it's called Indra's web, and I believe, Larry, you talked about that in your talk last month. But in Hindu literature, Indra was a great god who had this marvelous net of jewels. But this net of jewels had this amazing quality that each other jewel, well, first of all, it's stretched out to infinity, but that each jewel contained the reflection of every other jewel. So if you touched or affected any jewel in the net, all the other jewels would mirror or reflect that change simultaneously. So this is another image of the reflecting jewels. Another image. And so here we can see what we call the rest, but they, him, her, it, she, them, they are all reflected within ourselves. All of our family, all of our friends, all of our relatives are all reflected. We all contain reflections of them, and of course they contain reflections and echoes of ourselves within them. We are each other. And so ultimately we are the world. We are our parents, we are our families, our relatives, our ancestors, and our children. We are the people we love. We are the land, the lakes, the rivers, mountains. And obviously, we are the food we eat, the waters we drink, the soil our food comes from, the ponds and wells our water comes from. We are the thoughts we think, the books we read, the movies we watch, the music we listen to, and the people we love. We share and we live in a shared ocean of awareness. We are each other. And quite literally, we are the world. We are our world. So coming back to this idea that we are one, we are holograms in a holographic universe. Each of us literally contains the seeds or the blueprint of the whole. We are microcosms of the macrocosm. We are all inextricably interrelated, interactive, and interconnected, more than we realize. You're all familiar with telepathy and clairvoyance, but a lot of times you think of someone and the phone rings and it's that friend. Or in the history of invention, the only reason why we have the Bell Telephone Company is because supposedly the telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell, but we call it the Bell Telephone because Alexander Graham Bell got to the patent office by horseback 12 hours before another man with the same invention. 12 hours. And this so often happens, why they're giving Nobel Prizes to 2 and 3 people at a time now, is because, again, people working on the same ideas at the same time. Mind is shared. Mind is collective. We are related. We affect and are affected by each other. We all contain the seeds of each other. And there's a wonderful phrase in the Native American tradition, ahom mitakoyasin, which is an acknowledgement, all my relations. So going back to the quotation from Albert Einstein, so he said, a human being is part of the whole universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself and his thoughts and feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical illusion of consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison, restricting us to our personal desires and affections for a few persons nearest to us. But then he adds, our task must be to free ourselves from this prison, this delusion, by widening the circle of compassion and understanding to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in all its beauty. Because we are all creatures. All creatures are our friends, our family, our relatives, and we are the world. Thank you.